kept declining as time went on, and things got to such a desperate point that my boyfriend and I eloped and we got married so that I could get on his insurance plan. At least at that point, I was able to start care. I can remember, around this time complaining to my doctor about symptoms that I now know to be traumatic brain injury and Lyme disease related. And I ended up being referred out to psychiatric care where I was misdiagnosed as bipolar 2 and along with a handful of other psychiatric conditions. I would spend the next 8 years in psychiatric care, over medicated, misdiagnosed, and going on and off all of these terrible drugs that I responded absolutely terribly to. A lot of them made me suicidal, so much so that I have several unsuccessful attempts I made on my own life, because no one to suffer like that and to not have anyone listen to you, it's awful. It's awful. Simultaneously, I also entered pain management. And while I was in there, I was also over medicated so severely with fentanyl and oxycodone that it permanently changed my opioid tolerance. I would be in pain management for 5 years as I worked through chiropractic care, physical therapy, fascia release, just everything I needed to do to learn to walk properly again and try to be functional again. I really don't have many memories from that point in my life. I have like a general outline of what I did. Like I know how I got from point A to B, but I don't remember interactions with people, things like that. There's just not much memory there. And, eventually I got to a point where I was tired of feeling like I was being tortured in psychiatric care. So I left. I left and I tapered off the medication, and I was able to rejoin the workforce, even though it was at a very small percentage of what I was capable of before the accident. I was at least working, which to me is such a privilege. So I was thrilled with that, but it only lasted a couple years because I moved into a townhouse that had toxic mold in the air handler, and that was in like 2015. And ever since then, my health has just it's been so bad. Right after my exposure, I started making a lot of visits to the emergency room. I kept getting sicker and sicker. My health got to the point where it was very life threatening, and no one could tell me why. Like no doctors could figure me out. It was awful. And then I heard a podcast. This podcast was about hormone replacement therapy, healing traumatic brain injury, and a light bulb went off. I'm like, oh, yes, I have traumatic brain injury from that car accident. Suddenly, like the last 20 years of my life, like they make sense. I was so obsessed with this new answer that I had. So I made an appointment with my general practitioner. I go in and I tell him, I was like, hey, I think I've got traumatic brain injury, and I'd really like to learn more about hormone replacement therapy for it. And she laughed at me. She laughed in my face. She laughed at me, and then she referred me out to an endocrinologist who also pretty much laughed at me, said that I didn't need any form of hormone replacement therapy, and pretty much released me. Yeah, so it was at that point I knew if I don't leave conventional medicine, I'm going to die. Like they are not equipped to handle me. So I did that. And it's been about 6 years since I've left. I've made a lot of really amazing progress that is considered impossible by conventional care, like their model. I'm still not completely healed yet, though. I'm still, even as I record this, still teetering more or less between life and death. As time went on in alternative medicine, I did get on hormone replacement therapy, and that therapy saved my life. Then peptide therapy would make my life worth living by healing my brain damage and a few other medical conditions that I had. I think one of the hardest parts about my journey is that I have had absolutely terrible luck with doctors over the years. And I can confidently tell you that the worst moments of my life have been at the hands of medical professionals, no question about it. It's been so terrible for me that I have developed complex PTSD. And I honestly believe that the worst experience of all was with my last functional medicine doctor. I came to her nearly dead. And I knew that if she couldn't help me, I was going to die like very soon, very quickly. Um, I'll never forget my first appointment with her. Uh, she sat me down. She said, "I don't want you to worry. You're going to be okay. I get sick people like you in here all the time." I broke down in tears. I ugly cried in front of this woman. I didn't even know her. I was just so relieved that I didn't have to die. And while I was with her, I did make a lot of progress. I made some progress, not complete progress. I got some of the diagnoses that I need to apply for disability, but I still remained housebound and more or less really sick. She was missing a few really enormous pieces to my puzzle, but instead of digging further into my case, she started pressuring me to come off medication and to do more than I was capable of doing. And I believed that it was me doing all of this. So I went and I decided that it was time to handle my trauma. I found a trauma therapist that did a new kind of therapy, or at least new to me, called rapid resolution therapy. Her name was Ann Mayfield. The therapy worked. Like, it worked. And because of that, I immediately trusted Anne. And that is where things start going really, really wrong. First, she isolated me from my family by convincing me to cut off the remaining members of my family while I was deliriously sick and grieving the loss of my father. Then my doctor took it upon herself to violate HIPAA to tell my therapist that I wasn't progressing in the manner that she believed I should. And that just kind of opened a door for Anne. Yeah. After that, I ended up having a kind of a completely random conversation with a Lyme patient. And I was telling him just kind of like my timeline and what my struggles were and whatnot. And they said, it really does sound like you have Lyme disease. So I go back to my doctor and I tell her, I'm like, hey, I think there's something to this Lyme disease thing. And she's like, yeah, she agreed and put me on a month-long round of antibiotics that made me sicker than I have ever been in my entire life. I barely knew what was going on. I was hallucinating. I was on painkillers because the amount of pain I was in was unbearable. I was a mess. My health was completely mismanaged at that point. After Anne spoke to my doctor, she took it on herself to repeatedly ask me to become her friend during therapy sessions. Eventually, I agreed. I really didn't know what the hell was going on most of the time anyway, and I trusted her because the therapy that she gave me worked. She was really insistent on helping me in some way, whether that be with errands or whatnot. So when it came time to take my cat to the vet, I said, yeah, sure. You can give me a ride. So she came and picked me up, and that ended up being the most uncomfortable, awkward, awful car ride of my entire life. She spoke to me as if I were slow or handicapped, and the only topic she wanted to discuss was sex. It didn't matter how many times I tried to change the subject. She circled back and it was just all about sex. I didn't realize it because I was so out of it, but she had been grooming me. It became pretty evident towards the end of the car ride when she asked me to get a hotel room with her. That interaction caused me to go into psychosis. While I was in this state, I decided it was time for me to complain to my doctor about the HIPAA violation that just signaled a predator to come and, pursue me, and also her missing several life-threatening diagnoses while pushing me to do more than I was capable of doing. The problem was that I came out sounding like I was being threatening. I panicked. I apologized. I've I felt terrible about it, but it was too late. I had pissed her off. It was too late. From that point forward, she withheld care when I desperately needed it because I refused to sign her new privacy policy, which would give her permission to continue behaving in the same fashion as she was behaving with Anne. I'm not going to do that. So she kept me, but withheld care until we got right after the deadline for me to be able to apply for HIPAA. She abruptly dismissed me, deleted my entire medical record, over 1,000 pages, all of it gone. And then she replaced it with a 57-page document that did not contain any diagnoses, prescription history, any medical information, period, or my lab work. Nothing. It did contain the complaint email I sent while I was in psychosis and a lot of unflattering information to paint me in a certain light. There's a lot more to this whole story, and I may just do a deep dive on all of it because it's crazy. All of it is absolutely insane. After dismissing me and deleting my file and all that, she also blacklisted me. So that means here in the city of Atlanta, I have a ton of people who won't work with me because of what she told them. It took me a long time to finally, get my medical file from them. They refused to give me an electronic copy and, required that someone come up and get it from them directly. And I have that right here. Doesn't look like 57 pages, does it? And I know the 57-page thing is legit because that's what my GP has. This is over 500 pages. What it is 500 pages of paragraphs copied and pasted, and then she went through and used all of the very personal, detailed information she's learned about me over the years and made fun of me for 500 pages. That means she sat there and took away time from running her own practice to write a novel on why I suck. Her name is Dr. Eleanor Campbell, and she is at Campbell Family Medicine in Cumming, Georgia. She's also cyber stalking me on my socials. So, if you want to see how long it takes for me to get a cease and desist, or maybe you're curious as to how I plan on handling this entire situation, or perhaps you want to stick around and watch me do what she couldn't and heal myself, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you're curious about what it's like to wake up from brain damage when you don't know you had it for over a decade, I will be getting into that information as soon as I get a bit more comfortable with, doing this. If you'd like to attend the interview series or view the interview series I'm doing, I'm going to go ahead and drop a link to the registration page with this post. All right, thank you for joining me, and that is the short version of my story. All right, have a good one. Take care.